So I guess we need to start looking at sponsorship opportunities with BetterHelp because judging by the comments section of our last video, Buckeye fans are going to need a lot of therapy. The fallout from Tony Petitti's letter to the NCAA is absolutely real, and it is absolutely hilarious. But we'll get into that and what Tony Petitti said at Big Ten Media Days in just a second here. First off, this is the Big Ten Team Rivalry Show. Thank you so much for 1,818 subscribers. Really appreciate you guys coming out with us. Even the 86% of you that aren't subscribed, if you don't mind doing us a massive favor, it would mean a lot if you liked the video, possibly even subscribed, maybe even shared the show with a friend of yours. Even if it's just to say, hey, look at these clowns. They're morons. I mean, don't they know the hammer's coming? Don't they? Anyway, this is what Tony Petitti said at Big Ten Football Media Days. But actually, before we get to that, here's a little bit of context in case you live under a rock, like most Ohio State fans, and didn't hear this. What was in Tony Petitti's letter? So Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti sent a letter to the NCAA's Committee on Infractions arguing that Michigan should not face further punishment for the alleged sign-stealing operation. I don't know why I did that. It makes it look like I think that they did something bad. He emphasized that the Big Ten has already taken action by suspending Jim Harbaugh for the 3 games during the 2023 season, 3 games in which Michigan dominated, by the way, and that should suffice. Petitti couldn't attend the infractions hearing in person due to hip surgery. So, Tony, hope you're feeling better, man. That's a rough thing to miss a meeting for. Although I don't know, would I want to miss a meeting in favor of hip surgery or would I want to go to the meeting? That's a tough decision, not gonna lie. So the letter was read aloud during the June meeting. Now here's the thing, that right there by itself is actually really important because there were a lot of people on Twitter, not just Ohio State fans, I'll be fair here, saying that the fact that Tony Petitti sent the letter now means that he knows something's coming down the pipeline because of what happened at the Committee on Infractions meeting back in June. That's not true. The letter was read aloud during that meeting in June before Tony Petitti would have any, understanding or there would be any leaks of the punishment that was allegedly coming to Michigan at that point. So that's really a non-starter there. Now the question is, because a lot of Michigan fans are like, oh, hey, Tony Petitti sent a letter to the Big Ten, to the NCAA. That must mean that Michigan is going to be off the hook here. That's not entirely true because this a conference commissioner sending a letter to the NCAA defending a member school is not unheard of, but it is unusual. Conferences occasionally weigh in during NCAA investigations, especially when their own disciplinary actions are involved, that being the 2023 suspension of Jim Harbaugh. However, it is rare for a commissioner to publicly advocate for leniency while the NCAA is still deliberating. That being said, I don't know how public that actually was because I think the letter got leaked. So I don't know if that was intended to be public or not. I don't know. Typically, conferences defer to the NCAA's process and avoid influencing outcomes midstream. There have been past instances, though, of schools or conferences pushing back, like Miami's Pell Grant scandal in the 90s or the USC Reggie Bush case, but those were mostly school-led defenses, not conference-led interventions. And I'll get into what those were actually right now. I'll get into that now. So what happened with Miami's Pell Grant scandal? Well, that was the University of Miami staff helped 80 athletes fraudulently obtain more than $220,000 in Pell Grants. Those Pell Grants are federal loans that are meant mostly for low-income students. So that was pretty crappy of them, to be totally honest. The Big East Conference, which Miami belonged to at the time, did not publicly intervene or advocate for leniency. Miami largely handled its own defense internally. But in December of 1995, the NCAA found Miami guilty of lack of institutional control. They got a postseason ban, 31 scholarship reductions, and 3 years of probation. So it doesn't sound like they were publicly defending, the Big East was publicly defending Miami, but maybe a little bit behind closed doors. The one thing I will say, though, so we got this comment from Buckeyes Battle Cry. Really great guys. Go subscribe to them. They're awesome. But they make this point too. Not uncommon for commissioners of conferences to show support for teams during COI infraction hearings. 2013 Miami, 2023 Tennessee, and 2011 Ohio State. I don't know what happened in 2013 Miami. I can't remember what that was all about. 2011 Ohio State. I looked into that one because that's obviously Tattoo-gate. So we need to understand exactly what happened there. So in 2010, several Ohio State players, including star quarterback Terrell Pryor, had traded team memorabilia for tattoos and cash at a Columbus tattoo parlor. That obviously violated NCAA rules at the time. Today we call it NIL. Jim Tressel, that wasn't actually the big part that they got in trouble for. The big part that they got in trouble for was Jim Tressel's cover-up. He received emails in April of 2010 from a local attorney, and I have them. Actually, I don't have the emails, but I do have this lovely timeline here that shows Jim Tressel receives an email from Columbus attorney Christopher Cicero, the first of 12 that they exchanged. Cicero, a former Ohio State walk-on from the 80s, says he's told Buckeye players have been selling signed memorabilia to tattoo parlor owner Edward Reif, who is under federal investigation because he was a drug dealer, actually. That was April 2nd of 2010. It's not until the following year that Jim Tressel admits to having known that was going on. So that's why. He had actually even signed a document saying that he didn't know what was going on, which, that's a lie. Now, that being said, I still don't think that the NCAA should have come down that harshly on him. It sucks that he felt like he needed to cover that up. I feel like if he had just been out with it, then it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. Quite frankly, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think Ohio State should have been punished for that, period. Except for, I guess, maybe, suspensions. Like, Jim Tressel should have been suspended for half the season. Call it good. Like, he's overall a good guy. He was a great coach at Ohio State. And this is, it's NIL today, so it's just kind of funny. But in any case, the NCAA investigation and fallout once the emails surfaced resulted in Tressel being accused of permitting ineligible players to compete and failing to act with honesty and integrity. Kind of a similar thing that Jim Harbaugh was being accused of over Burgergate. In the end, the NCAA hit Ohio State with vacated wins from the 2010 season, including a Sugar Bowl victory, postseason ban for 2012, and then 2 years of probation, 5-year show cause penalty for Jim Tressel. Now, the question was, did the Big Ten defend Ohio State at the time? Yes, they did. They did ask for leniency. Jim Delaney, who was the Big Ten commissioner at the time, he had said, actually, I'll go to the timeline here. Big Ten commissioner on April 28th, this is 2011, I want to say. No, this must be 2010 still. Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delaney says he may not have defended the suspended players if he had known that Jim Tressel knew. He says, quote, "I appealed on behalf of the school, but we didn't have the information we have today," he says. Delaney adds that coaches should be held to a higher standard than athletes because they're adults, teachers. So, yeah, it sucks. It's a crappy situation because Jim Tressel should have said something. It also just kind of sucks because, who cares? It was tattoos. They weren't getting a competitive advantage. And, just the fact that it made those players ineligible, but he played them anyway, the backups would have been just as good. Let's be honest here. In any case, so that answers the question. This isn't necessarily uncommon. Commissioners of their conferences show support for those teams. What makes this different? This isn't different. I think the only thing that you could say that's different about this is the fact that we pretty much have all of the facts at this point. We pretty much know exactly what happened from leaks, from evidence that has been presented or lack thereof. And I could be wrong. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think right now what makes this different is that Tony Petiti had received that letter from the NCAA saying that they had a treasure trove of evidence and whatnot, and then Tony Petiti at that point decides to go ahead and suspend Harbaugh for the 3 games, and then says that based on the letter that he had gotten, the 3-game suspension was enough. So from what we're seeing, or at least from what we've been seeing in the news, it doesn't sound like Tony Petiti has any new information that he didn't already have, and he had already made the decision to suspend Harbaugh for those 3 games. So that's it. Harbaugh gets the 3-game suspension. He serves it. He now has a show cause for, I think, 4 years based on Burgergate. And Tony Petiti thinks, all right, we're done. And it's not because he feels like Michigan has been dragged through the mud or Michigan's the victim here. It's because he felt like the suspension was enough. That was good enough. That's the only reason why this one feels just a tad bit different. Now, let's get to what he says at Big Ten football media days. So there was a question asked or posed to him, which says this: there's a report that you wrote a letter to the NCAA about the Michigan sign stealing scandal. I'm curious whether that letter happened or not. Do you believe that should be put to bed, that the punishment you issued is strong enough, and that the investigation should be closed? Here's what Petitti says. Well, the first part, I'm going to confirm that we did submit a letter. It's not uncommon in proceedings for conference offices to weigh in. I'm not going to address what the contents of the letter we sent are. That's interesting. Well, actually, no, it's not, because it's an ongoing process. I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment about whether it's enough or not while there are individuals deliberating. But I think that's the right thing to do in the process. So, okay, yeah, I mean, it's still an open investigation. Connor Stalions even said he still can't talk about it because of what's going on. Although he has a tendency to open his mouth anyway. But that's what's going on right now, is that he's not going to comment further on it, but he doesn't really need to, because the letter was already leaked. We know that Tony Petiti already asked for leniency for Michigan based on the suspension that he gave to Jim Harbaugh. So the fact that he's not saying anything more about it, that's not really surprising to me. He goes on and says, look, I will say, having gone through this, one thing to point out is I think when you think about the CSC, that's the College Sports Commission, and the discipline and what we're trying to build with the new entity, having an enforcement mechanism that's faster is a priority, one that reacts more quickly. That's a given. The NCAA is a snail crawling on salt. They are ridiculous. They are so busy sniffing the sticks that they shove up each other's buttholes that they can't stop for a second and just do their jobs. Their job is to govern the sport, but they're so stuck up their own buttholes that they can't even do that. They can't do the basic part of their job. This started 2 years ago. I mean, it was before the 2023 Michigan State game that Michigan was given a notice of allegation. Actually, it was leaked. I don't think Michigan was actually given the NOI or the NOA just yet. So, and now here we are, almost 2 years exactly later. The 2025 season is about to start. All the players, all the coaches and whatnot that were involved with this whole thing are gone. Connor Stalions has been out of the game for a couple of years already too. Like, this is ridiculous. Why can't we just move on? And why can't the NCAA get their stuff together? Tony Petiti goes on. He says, this is a system we have now. It's been in place for a long time. It functions the way it was built, but I do think there's this consensus among our colleagues that whatever we are building for the enforcement piece that's going to live inside the College Sports Commission, that's got to be still there. It's difficult to still be talking about this almost 2 seasons later. I think everybody agrees that part of the process should change. Yeah, that part of the process absolutely should change. Whether Michigan gets punished or not, it should have happened a long time ago. Or at least we should have been done with this a long time ago, because the fact that it's still hanging over the school, like, let's pretend nothing happened, okay? And again, this is coming from someone who doesn't believe that Michigan actually got a competitive advantage on the field from sign stealing. So let's just put that away for a second and say the truth comes out and we can put it to bed, nothing happened. Well, then you've got a situation where this was hanging over the school's head for 2 years. This was hanging over the head of the staff, of the players, of the recruits, of the coaches, of the administration. Everybody, this is hanging over their heads for so long. That time has an impact. I mean, what if Michigan weren't actually able to recruit as well as they are? That's impacting the football team, because the NCAA can't come to a decision soon enough. Not because Michigan actually did anything. Again, for the sake of this thought exercise, we're pretending that Michigan is completely innocent, even if I actually think that they are. This is still hanging over their heads, impacting the program unnecessarily. That's on the NCAA. That's not fair. These things need to be dealt with, and they need to be dealt with quickly, because if it turns out that even the NCAA says, yeah, Michigan didn't do anything, and if that had negatively impacted Michigan's program, that's money. That's lost money that you're talking about. That's lost opportunity that you're talking about for players. That's potentially issues with careers for the coaches and stuff like that you're talking about too. And I would be saying the same thing if it happened at Ohio State. I did say the same thing if that happened at Ohio State. I don't think Jim Tressel should have been fired for that. It sucks that he covered that up to the NCAA. That was wrong. But he probably didn't think that what the players were doing was that big of a deal. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't editorialize at this point, because he did know that they were getting involved with a drug dealer, although hopefully the players didn't know he was a drug dealer, but whatever. The point being that I still don't think Jim Tressel should have been fired for that. So, I would have said this had it impacted any school. The fact that Penn State got games vacated. I mean, the Penn State scandal with Jerry Sandusky had nothing to do with the players. It was just the head coach. And even then, still not entirely sure. And that's just because I haven't looked into it much since, not necessarily because it hasn't come out. But either way, it didn't impact the players, or the players weren't involved at all. So why were games vacated? That's not fair to them. So the fact that this is happening to Michigan, if it happened to anybody, that's just not fair, and that needs to change. Now, let's get to a couple of your comments, because like I said, or teased at least, the meltdown is real and it's freaking epic, and I just freaking love it. Not Buckeyes Battle Cry. They didn't melt down. I really like them. Okay, actually, here's a Wolverine melting down. Bro, this means we are screwed. He's Burks D. Wolverine. Bro, this means we are screwed. If the Big Ten is defending us over the penalties, this means the NCAA wants to give us big penalties. I'm nervous. No. No, that doesn't necessarily mean that the NCAA wants to give us big penalties. In fact, the NCAA even came out and said that Michigan, or the NCAA president still came out and said that Michigan won the Natty fair and square. I mean, you can't then take that away from Michigan after you yourself already said that it was fair. That just wouldn't hold up in a court of law. So Matt Rannells 8485 says, Petiti doesn't have a say against the ruling. NCAA will overrule. Laughing face with a sweat bead. Why? Okay, first off, the all caps. Calm down. Secondly, the laughing emojis are getting a little out of hand here, guys. I mean, a lot of Ohio State fans have been commenting things like in all caps, or saying, oh, you guys are about to get your butts handed to you. The hammer's about to come down, with a million different laughing emojis. It makes you look a tad bit psychotic. I'm not going to lie. You look just a little bit desperate. He doesn't have a say, or I think Cliff responded to this. He doesn't have a say, you're right, but he's also not likely to risk his reputation for something he can't control. Oh, that's probably fair. I don't understand. Michael Crabtree 6276 says, I don't understand why Connor would waste money sending people to games when you can watch the all 22 of the games and get the same information. It don't make no sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, yeah, you can get all of the information off of the all 22, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Frosty Mug 3123 says, pretty misleading headline. Every team in the Big Ten not named Michigan revolted and demanded the Big Ten issue punishment on Michigan. Not entirely true. It was mostly just Purdue, Rutgers, Ohio State, Michigan State, and I think there was one more. Possibly Illinois. Anyway, remember Harbaugh not being allowed at games late in the season? Petiti is dirty. The Big Ten wants Michigan held accountable by the NCAA. What? Why would Petiti send the letter then? That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Yeah. I don't really understand what that means. Here's one that I should have found earlier that's more of a meltdown. Exploit de poor. Oh, that's mean. Don't do that. Says, so what? This changes nothing. The SEC is standing off with the Big Ten about that fourth non-conference game. Thus, Petit's power over the NCAA is waning. No rational human being believes lying and cheating should be allowed. Duh? They lied and cheated in 7 games in 2023. No, they didn't. The institution is being punished, not the coach. Okay, all right. Petit, you're spelling his name wrong, dude, has no clue what he is talking about with Harbaugh's suspension being a fitting punishment. Sure, he has no clue what he's talking about, but he's the conference commissioner. Okay. All right. You people are insane. I mean, that's a personal attack. I can't really refute that. Penn State had vacated wins, which didn't involve players, but coaches only. Yeah, I agree. That sucked. That shouldn't have happened. Geez, you people are deluded. All right. I mean, maybe. Who knows? So, Andrew 6WG says, "Aw, cry. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Anyway, we're going to leave it right there. What do you think? What do you think about the letter? What do you think about Tony Petitti's conference or college sports commission and all that they're trying to put together? Do you think that the NCAA needs to be overhauled or just done away with completely? What do you think about the sign stealing stuff? It's all kind of crazy nonsense. It's just wild stuff. So let us know what you think in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget we are also live Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. So join us in the chat there, and we'll catch you in the next video.